Hey guys, go ahead, send your congratulations on this really catchy title for a chess video that I came up with. Although I bet that you know that it's probably not going to be about my non-existent love life. I'm a little bit more subtle than that with my title choices. So what is this confession of love going to be about? Obviously about chess, guys. I am going to be telling you about something that is just kind of inspiring and thrilling to me. And okay, let's start this exploration. I've been studying this book called The King's Indian according to Tigran Petrosian. Just started, actually. Definitely one of the world champions that I have an affinity for. Always was inspired by his exchange sacrifices. It's one of like my favorite things in chess, the positional exchange sac, and his name is basically synonymous with that concept in chess. So he's also a King's Indian player with both the white and black pieces. I mean, he's so famous for his King's Indian play that there's a whole variation in the King's Indian named the Petrosian variation, right? But he wasn't only playing this as white, he was also playing this as black. So that is a pretty cool thing. You know, it's not all the time that you see a person who is basically well known for playing both sides of an opening. Usually it's like one or the other. Okay, so here we go. This is actually not going to be based on his games. It's more like his games are sort of prompting me to do some analysis of my own. And so actually the things that I'm going to show you are just things that I was analyzing with the computer. So we have the classical variation of the King's Indian. And yeah, so far it's following a game of his where he played the move d5. That is actually the Petrosian system, the early pawn push. You can also hold attention with the move castles. That's called the classical main line. Knight bd7, one of the many moves for black. Bishop g5, that was also his concept to kind of provoke the move h6. And here the move for black is g5, breaking the pin, then knight h5, try to go to f4, try to play f5 at some point. But I was curious. I mean, like, the point of the bishop here is that you're pinning the knight and you're not letting black do their typical plan of moving the knight and going f5. But I was like, all right, let's say I don't want to commit to that pawn push and I want to get out of the pin. But the problem is I can't really move my queen yet because there's always these annoying knight b5 ideas, right? So I was just like, let's just see what happens if I play a6. I know it's a little slow, but we're just learning about this opening. So now what follows is just what I considered some logical tries for each side. Knight d2, kind of very normal move. You're opening up the way for the f-pawn to move and actually also for the g-pawn. Queen e8. So now we're out of the pin. We're ready to move this knight. There's no knight b5. And now there's two interesting options for white. We're going to look at both of them because that's where the jewels were sort of uncovered in both directions. But let's start with the move castles, like the more standard move. Let's say we go knight h7, f3, f5, bishop f2, and f4. You know, not a bad idea usually for black is to just grab space with that move, and it's the prelude to an attack with a g-pawn. So white goes b4. I was looking at the move h5. It's probably more precise to start with g5, but I was just like, let's start with this pawn, making sure like there's no like g4 ideas. c5, g5. So white is expanding on the queen side, black on the king side. We got to make sure this pawn doesn't fall. And here we go. So c6, yeah, I analyzed the move cd, very playable. And of course, I wanted to look at this move. You know, when you have a chance to do that move when you're hitting the knight, it's like very logical because if I take, you take, the d5 square becomes available to like a white knight, and that's usually desirable. So I'm looking at this position, and of course, what can come to my mind for black? Well, knight f6, right? That's the normal move. You can also take and then play knight f6. But imagine, my absolute shock when I'm seeing like the computer engine trying to tell me that one of black's top moves in this position is the move g4. Like, how can that be? So we're gonna leave alone the fact that white can take the pawn. It's like one of their options and they can try to take the pawn instead of the knight. But obviously the shocking part about the move g4 is like you've left your knight en prise for just one pawn. And it's not like you're checkmating white, right? Like, okay, you got some space on the king side. But the computer is showing this, like, this is possible way to play, right? So obviously, okay, this is why I'm showing you this particular example, guys, because this one just was expanding my vision of chess so much, like that this is possible. So how can we give up a piece for a pawn, not even have any winning threats yet, it seems? Well, we do actually have a big threat. It must be said, guys, the move g3 is a very concrete threat. And if the bishop moves away after that, we're going to come in with our queen via g5. And, if they ever play h3, we're going to sacrifice a bishop there or a knight. We go knight g5 and we win. So actually, this move is a very substantial threat. If they take us, we take back. And let me just give you some example. Like, let's say the rook moves here. We go here, here, and then this pawn is extremely dangerous, and we transfer our queen over for that checkmate. And you just don't have a way to get rid of this powerful pawn quickly enough. So, okay, they need to do something specific about the move g3. So let's say they go bishop h4. I do think a lot of people can think of that. I mean, it's quite natural. And then the computer goes bishop f6. And just calmly trying to get rid of that bishop. Now whites, I don't know how many people will have the precision to play queen e1. But basically the point is, like, if you take, which you might think is a normal move, it looks pretty normal, it's actually relatively getting better for black. Let's say you go here now, trying to get the queen to h4. Then we have a nice choice between the quiet prophylactic move, queen g5, or we can just go with g3 right away. And if every time they close things up, like this queen perches on h4 and some sacrifice lands on h3. So already, white needs to show some precision, right? So they had to make these moves just to kind of keep some control. And now the computer is like, well, you kind of want to take and then bring the queen out. So now we're going to go here as like a prophylactic measure against that. So now when you take me, I'm going to take with the queen, and you can't bring out your queen. And the computer is giving this as about like a 1 pawn advantage for white, which is, it's not humongous, right? Given the fact that, you only have 1 pawn for the piece. So basically the computer is saying, oh, there's a lot of compensation for black. And I think practically speaking, I mean, it's playable, or maybe not in a classical game against, but certainly like in a blitz or rapid game. The idea here is basically you can go king h8, rook g8, or you can go like rook f7, rook g7, just kind of build up. I feel like probably we need to analyze this for like a long time with the computer, maybe to get like a clear evaluation, like about the compensation. But this is basically kind of a viable sacrifice, and it was pretty shocking to me that such a thing could exist. So kind of what's the lesson? Well, I guess one lesson we can take away is like space is very powerful, right? Because all of the play now is going to be on the king side. White's queen side play is over, actually. Once they've given away that pawn, their 2 knights are basically doing nothing. That's actually pretty relevant here, right? Because white's whole play in the King's Indian usually takes place on the queen side. So now they're kind of doing nothing, and we're getting to attack on the king side. So that's the compensation for the piece. It's this dangerous space against their king. All right, shall we look at Irina's second favorite example that inspired this video? So we had this position, we looked at the move castles, but the computer was suggesting another approach for white, g4. Definitely more sophisticated. You're probably not going to be castling short after that move, but the point is you want to clamp down on that plan with f5. Okay, so the computer suggested it. I was like, all right, let's continue with our idea. Queen c2, you want to castle queenside. We go here, most direct. We temporarily sacrifice a pawn. And now you really don't want to just let me take it. Because if I take it, black's pieces are going to get too active. So bishop g4 is kind of forced. Okay, so the first thing is we go e4. I mean, this is typical enough that it wouldn't get me super excited, right? Opening up the bishop on the long diagonal, it's pretty dangerous to take that pawn. I mean, you actually can, I think, do something like that. But the point is that in like these positions, there's always this rook f4 idea. So when you finally castle and you feel pretty safe, there's like this annoying double attack that is giving, you know, black's position their viability. So that's why after e4, let me find the moment, here we go. Let's say we just castle, right? Actually, you got to look at knight d3, but apparently that check is not super dangerous. The king just walks away, and then this pawn actually has less protection. So the computer has a different approach. So what would you consider normal for black? Well, of course, you know, some kind of bishop f5, right? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be making this video to show you bishop f5, but then the computer shows me rook f5. And I'm like, come again? Like, okay, rook f5, huh? You want to give up the stronger piece. I mean, it's just incredible, right? Incredible ideas that arise out of this opening. So the bottom line is it just, first of all, wants to have the pawn supported, thinks this is a very powerful pawn, thinks that this bishop has a lot of potential. As an example of the potential of this bishop, like for example, let's say you try to move your king to safety. Well, at least out of that check on d3. Well, that's already a bad move because after queen f5, I guard my bishop, attack this one, and then this move is pretty devastating, right? So the bishop definitely has his power, and in fact, I think maybe one of the moves here, something like knight f1, white's already got to kind of really look hard for their defensive moves. Now, this is interesting, the check with the idea of going to b4, then pushing through e3. The computer also gives us just bishop g4 as a move. Now, I think the computer even wants to like give up this rook because our initiative is just so strong here. Let's see what else I wanted to tell you about this position, guys. So the funny thing is he doesn't even necessarily want to take the rook. Like the computer is so convinced by the exchange sack that he thinks like other moves should be preferred, like either taking the pawn, which always kind of walks into these like rook f4 ideas. And somehow, because all of these hanging pieces, you know, we hold the balance. Of course, it's a sharp position. Like, we're not going to look into these nuances. And the other move is f3. So I guess you want to try to win the pawn and use the pin over here. And then the computer produces, like, this shocking move. It's, like, incredible. It's like one exchange sack was not enough. Like, go ahead. You know, and again, taking the rook is actually not a very good idea because the queen comes out with an attack on the bishop, and then I can win that pawn, and black would be doing well. So white's got to find some other approaches here. But anyway, that's kind of, these examples, right, are like so stunning. And that's what really inspired me to name the video what I did, right? Because I really just am in love with this opening, with the richness of it. You know, because it's just not every opening, actually, guys. If you like play chess long enough, you'll realize it's not every opening that allows for moves like that. And the King's Indian is just full of these ideas. Like, you know, I've been playing chess for a long time, right? But like these two ideas that I showed you, especially the p-sack of the knight in the first one, it's just they're just pretty mind-blowing. Yeah. So anyway, I think, you know, this video should give you a little bit of inspiration, especially if you're already a King's Indian player, but even if you're not, now you have some idea about one of the coolest openings in chess.